welcome to Time to Talk. I'm Argie Holliman, and today is Wednesday, March 13th, 2019. We're moving right along. Going to get into spring sooner or later. We are live today, and we are glad to have as our guest attorney Jennifer Roach, who is from Open Legal Services of West Michigan. Is it West Michigan or Western Michigan?
West Michigan.
West Michigan. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you.
It's so good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, yes. And we're glad that you're here, going to answer some legal questions for us. First of all, tell us about the firm, Open Legal Services.
Okay, so Open Legal Services has been around since August of 2018. And what we are trying to do is give legal services to people who don't have money to hire, a more expensive attorney. We do flexible payment plans for people. We do lower retainers. A lot of times when people go to hire an attorney, they need thousands of dollars for a retainer. So we try to work with people with what their income is. We try to set our hourly rate at a rate that's affordable for people. Our philosophy is that everyone is entitled to have a good attorney when they're going through legal troubles, and we want to make sure that that is attainable for them.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good service because so many people fall between the cracks. Maybe they don't qualify for legal aid, and to hire a private attorney is so expensive, and then you're in a legal situation and you're terrified.
Exactly. And there are also situations where people might qualify for legal aid, but legal aid has a conflict on the case. If their spouse in a divorce, for example, was already working with legal aid, then they would not be able to do that, even though their income might be low enough for legal aid. So we try to kind of fill that gap for people.
Okay. And where are you located?
My office is in Muskegon. I'm in private practice, and then I contract with Open Legal Services. But that doesn't mean I only practice in Muskegon. I travel to other counties as well.
Mm-hmm. So you'll come to Kent County, and you work with other attorneys in your office from Kent County?
Yes, we do work with some Kent County attorneys as well.
Mm-hmm. We want our viewers to know that you can ask Jen questions about family law, bankruptcy, child custody, which comes under family law, criminal law, everything. Pretty much you can ask her some questions. If you have a legal question, just make it brief. That's all. We can't take your whole case today.
Right.
But give us a call at 616-459-4881, and we will start taking calls right away because this hour is going to go so fast. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background.
Okay. I was born and raised in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I went to college at Western Michigan University, and then I went to the Thomas M. Cooley Law School, Lansing campus after that. And then I kind of was all over the state a little bit, just kind of going wherever there was work to do. I first became an attorney 10 years ago, and that was when the economy was kind of down, so you really just had to do whatever work was available for you to do. So I did some work in Lansing, I did some work in Grand Rapids, I lived on the east side of the state by Detroit and did some work kind of all over the east side of the state, and then finally got to come back to West Michigan and moved to Muskegon and have been there for about 7 years now.
Mm-hmm. What do you like about being an attorney?
I really like helping people. I like feeling like I'm doing something important that really makes a difference in people's lives. I think that's the biggest thing that I like about it.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that sometimes people just need some direction, just need some brief information so they know the next thing to do?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sometimes I tell people always know the information that they need to get through to the judge or to whoever's handling their case, but they might not always know how to present that information. So that is something that I try to help people with. I try to give people some guidance. If they can't afford to hire an attorney, I try to at least let them leave my office with some information that will help them move forward on their own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you find that people are surprised that court is nothing like you see on television.
Sometimes people are. I made a joke to somebody today that it's not like Judge Judy, and they were expecting it to be a lot more dramatic, and it's not. Usually, if you go in for your hearing, there's nobody else in the courtroom. There's not an audience there. It's just you and the other party and the attorneys and the judge. There's not many people in there. It's it's not a big dramatic Law and Order moment.
Right, and the judge isn't going off.
No, there's not as much yelling as there is on TV.
They have to do that for television.
Exactly.
Let's talk about family law, since that's one of your areas of expertise.
Sure.
What do people need to do if, unfortunately, they're going to get a divorce and they have children? How do they need to prepare for something like that legally?
Sure. Well, the legal steps, the legal process is to file a complaint for divorce. That's the first thing you do. And then you have to have it served on the other party. Once that's served on the other party, they have 21 days to file an answer with the court. Once they file their answer, the case will kind of proceed. Court hearings will get scheduled. If they don't file an answer, then it's considered a default. And in that scenario, you kind of get whatever you want. What I tell people is it's within reason, but you just kind of put in your judgment whatever it is that you want out of the divorce, and the judge typically will sign that because the other person didn't care to appear or make any type of argument. A lot of times friend of the court will get involved when there are children, and they will try to make a decision about custody and parenting time and child support before it gets to a judge. So they kind of try to, keep things easier so that the judge's docket doesn't get so clogged up, because there are a lot of family law cases. And when there are children involved, the case stays with the court until the children are 18, because anything will come up. Custody issues will come up, or money issues will come up, and people will have to come back and get things situated again.
How do judges usually decide, okay, who should have the children, or, who should have custody, rather?
Okay. There's something called the best interest factors. It's a statutory guideline that judges have to go through whenever they're determining custody of children. And there are things like which parent shows love and affection to the child, which parent is more helpful to the children with school and extracurricular activities. Has there been any domestic violence between the parents? What's the health of the parents like? There's a whole lot of factors that the judge has to go through and determine basically if they favor one parent over the other, or maybe the parents are equal. And then they'll make a determination about whether custody should be split on a 50-50 basis, or if it's better for one parent to have primary custody of the children, and have them during the week, and have the other parent have them on weekends or every other weekend or something like that. So there is a lot of information that the judge has to go through to decide what's best for the kids.
We are live today on this Wednesday, March 13th, 2019, and you can give us a call if you have legal questions. Our number is 616-459-4881. That's 616-459-4881. We're talking to attorney Jen Roach. And when we look at the children, at what age do they a judge will ask the children, well, what do you want?
A lot of judges will meet with children no matter what, once they get to probably about 10 years old, maybe a little bit younger, kind of depending on their maturity level. And they try to get a feel for what the kids want, and if it's a reasonable request for the kids, that they're not picking one parent over the other because that parent, has more video games or something at their house. They want to make sure that, there's a legitimate reason why the children would pick one parent over the other. And they do take that into consideration. That's one of the child custody factors, but it is only one of the factors. So I think there's this idea that when kids get to be a certain age, they get to just decide which parent they get to live with, and that's not necessarily true. I think realistically that is the case once kids get to be maybe like 15, 16, 17, because at that age it's hard to force them to go, somewhere that they don't want to go. But that's really just one of the custody factors that the judge has to consider.
What do they do when one parent practices a certain religion and the other parent practices something else? How do they come to a conclusion about that?
Well, that's a tough question for me to answer because I think it probably depends on the judge. And it's probably going to depend on which parent gets primary physical custody of the children. And if the children identify more with one religion than the other, that's going to be an important factor in that decision too. So I think that's just kind of going to depend on a case-by-case basis how the judge would rule on that.
Okay, our lines are open, 616-459-4881. Tell us the different areas. You have a lot of areas that you practice at Open Legal Services of West Michigan.
Yes. So we do the family law stuff, which is divorce, custody, parenting time, child support, and I do child abuse and neglect work. And then we do bankruptcy, Social Security, disability, landlord, tenant, criminal defense, and that's pretty much it.
It covers quite a wide range and everything.
It does.
Yes,
it does. Yeah.
Yes,
and
yes.
if somebody needs help with something that's not one of those areas, it's something that we might still be able to take on. And if we can't, we try to refer people to an attorney that they'll be able to work with.
Let's talk about Social Security, and we know that you can get it, at 65?
Yes, for retirement, yes.
But if you have a disability claim, what goes into that?
So what you have to do initially is file an application with Social Security. There's a lot of information that goes into that. It's a pretty long application. And sometimes it's helpful to have an attorney go through and complete that application with you so you know that you're getting good information in that application for Social Security when they review it. Most applications are denied initially by Social Security. And when that happens, it's very important to file the paperwork for an appeal within the time frame that they give you so that you can get scheduled for a hearing. It can take a year to 2 years to get that hearing date actually with a judge. But in the meantime, you're sort of accruing benefits so that if your claim is eventually approved by the judge, you'll get a back pay for the time that you were waiting between the time of your appeal and the time of the hearing. The important thing is to have solid medical records. You want to have records that show that you've been meeting with your doctor, that you've been following the doctor's recommendations, that if physical therapy was recommended, you went to physical therapy, that you've been following up with your treatment. Social Security wants to see that you really tried to resolve your issues before you kind of said, okay, I can't work, I need disability from Social Security.
Do you help people who maybe they were on disability, but then they got cut off for some reason?
I don't do much of that. I have done that a couple times. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting the right paperwork filed, or maybe there was an asset that came into question that you need to determine what's going to happen with that asset. Hopefully it's something small like that that's easy to fix.
Okay. Excuse me. And do you have to have a long work history to get Social Security?
You do not. Your work history is going to affect the amount that you're going to get from Social Security. They're going to take a look at your wages. When you're working, you're basically paying an insurance premium for Social Security in case you become disabled and you need Social Security disability. If you have no work experience, but you cannot work, you're disabled and you're not able to work, you might qualify for SSI, which is different. That's a different system, and that amount is the same for anybody who's on SSI. So that doesn't vary depending on how much your wages were.
Okay. In the political arena, we hear that Social Security is going to run out of money anytime soon. Any thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. But the bottom line is people have paid into that system their entire working lives. That's what it was designed for. It was exactly designed to help people when they're not able to work or when they retire. And people are just trying to collect their own money, basically, when they're filing for Social Security. So, yeah.
When you come to an attorney's office, I'm sure it helps to be prepared. What are some of the things in general that you should bring with you?
it helps to bring any paperwork that you have. So if you, for example, if you're in a divorce case and your spouse is already filed for divorce, it's helpful to bring in, if you got the complaint for divorce, sometimes people will file emergency motions at the same time as filing the complaint. As an attorney, I'd want to see all of that right off the bat. It's helpful for me to know what I'm getting into, but it's also helpful for me to give you better information about your case and what potentially could happen with your case if I know what's going on with it. It's helpful not necessarily to have paperwork, but to have good knowledge about your spouse's income, any assets that you have, houses, boats, cars, all that kind of stuff, retirement accounts, how much money is in bank accounts. That's all good to know right off the bat. And that's also important if you're the person going through the divorce to get that information before maybe assets get moved around or hidden or things like that. It's important to know what assets are there to be divided in the divorce.
Mm-hmm. So it helps to be organized because it also saves time and money.
Absolutely.
Excuse me, because then you can move through at least your meeting as fast and, well, not fast, but at least as thoroughly as possible.
Right, yeah. Helps to be efficient.
Yeah.
It also helps to have questions written down because a lot of times, once you get in there, you're stressed out, you're emotional, you might not remember all the questions that you needed to get answered. So I always tell people to make a list of questions, or if they're going to court on their own, I always tell people to make a list of things that they want to make sure get covered during their hearing so they don't forget anything.
That's very important because, as we said, court is not like TV, it moves very fast, very quickly, and so you better know what you're going to say or ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And once it's done, it's done. You can't, it's rare that you can go back and say, oh wait, I forgot to tell this to you, Judge. You should make a different decision. That's just not how it works. So
or you're hoping that the judge will ask you something, but you better bring it up.
Right. Absolutely.
We're talking to Attorney Jen Roach today, and she's answering your legal questions. And so we're going to take a break, and then you can call Jen at 616-459-4881. What are your hours?
Typically 9 to 5. If people need evening appointments, I try to work with that because sometimes it's hard for people to get in between 9 and 5. I try to do earlier appointments if people need that also, so I try to be really flexible with people.
How many attorneys are you working with?
I work for myself, so I don't have any other attorneys working with me. I work in an office that has 2 other attorneys in there that are separate from my practice.
Okay. We're answering your legal questions today. Give us a call, 459-4881. Don't miss this opportunity, and don't see me somewhere and say, I wanted to ask her about this. Well, this is your chance. 459-4881. You're watching Time to Talk. We will be right back.
Mother's Day is almost here. Right now, Pro Flowers has an exclusive
Definitely don't ignore it. If you get a notice that you have a warrant for your arrest, you want to get yourself turned in as quickly as you can. And in most counties, you want to go early in the morning, and you probably don't want to go on a Friday because you might get stuck there all weekend.
Okay.
And you want to go early in the morning so you don't get stuck there overnight. You want to be able to get there at a time when the judge can see you and hopefully get you out on bond. The other important thing is to not make any statements to the police. Any statements at all. Some people want to kind of explain why they did what they did. You know, for example, you stole baby formula because your baby needed it and you didn't have the money for it. Well, that's still retail fraud. It's still illegal no matter the reason for it. So don't make any statements like that because that could be used against you, will be used against you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what should you look for when you're looking for an attorney?
You should look for an attorney who has experience, who is organized, who is familiar. I think it's helpful to be familiar with the court where they're practicing, to have built relationships with, you know, prosecutors' offices and other attorneys in town, and who, you know, has practiced in front of those judges before and can kind of give you an estimate of what the judge might do in your case.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We received a question from the back, the back production room, and the question was the person's mother, I think, or mother-in-law is 91, 92, but back and was born in the South, and does not have a birth certificate and different things, documents that she does have, they have different dates, and they differ maybe by a year or something like that. So it's kind of hard for her to prove who she is other than saying, this is who I am,
Right.
and this is how old I am. So what can she do about that in terms of Social Security?
I honestly don't know. I've had somebody else ask me this question, and it wasn't a potential client, and I didn't go back and do a lot of research into it. I think if I had a prospective client coming in, I probably would do more research into it to find out what they could do. I think the first step would probably be trying to get a birth certificate, have one issued by the county where they were born. I don't know how you would go about doing that. 90 years after your birth. Yeah, that's a tough situation to be in.
Mm-hmm, it is. We're talking to attorney Jen Roach, and she is with Open Legal Services, and they provide a lot of legal services, including bankruptcy and criminal law. Let's talk about bankruptcy.
Okay.
How do you know, besides like, oh, my pocketbooks are empty, that you will need to file bankruptcy?
If your debts are getting to the point where you can't pay them, that's typically when people come in. You know, things they've gotten overwhelmed, they can't keep making the payments, they can't afford it. That's typically when I see people come in. The other situation where I see people come in is when they've gotten behind on their house payments.
What's the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13?
Chapter 7 is kind of the traditional idea of a bankruptcy. It's a liquidation bankruptcy. So debts are liquidated. You don't have to pay any of them back. And then assets typically are not liquidated as long as we can protect them with the exemptions that the bankruptcy code allows us to protect property with. If you have too much equity in your home, for instance, we might not be able to protect that in a Chapter 7. But typically people don't lose any assets in Chapter 7. They just kind of get the fresh start that they need and move on with their lives. A Chapter 13 is a repayment plan. So what we do with that is take a look at your income and your expenses and figure out if there is an amount that you can pay every month towards your creditors. Typically, your income will decide whether or not you should be in a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13. However, if you are behind in your house payments, Chapter 13 is what you're going to want to do, because there's a process through that repayment plan to catch up on your mortgage arrears so that you don't have to worry about your home being sold in a foreclosure. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of other reasons why one might be more beneficial than the other in your case.
And how long does bankruptcy stay on your record? Your
7 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. It might not necessarily affect your score that long, and some creditors are going to be more willing to work with you than others might be. The big thing to remember about bankruptcy is once you file a Chapter 7, you can't file another Chapter 7 for 8 years. So a lot of creditors might be more inclined to work with you after filing for bankruptcy because they know you can't file again for 8 years. Mm-hmm. So you might be able to get a credit card to start reestablishing your credit, or even a car loan.
Mm-hmm. Is that something to feel bad about? Like, well, I had to do this and I didn't want to, but I had to do it.
No, it's not. And everybody always does when they come in to talk about bankruptcy. I always tell them not to. I don't think bankruptcy has the same stigma that it used to. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times people feel like, the judge or the trustee who's involved might just kind of look at them in a judgmental way, like they were stupid with their money, or they, went out and went on vacations and bought TVs and stuff like that with credit cards that they couldn't afford to pay back. And that's typically not the case. Typically people were using their credit cards to get by when they were having a reduction in income, or people can no longer pay their bills because they had a reduction in income or a loss of a job, or they had a lot of medical bills because they had kind of a surprise big medical issue come up and now they can't afford to pay those back. It's typically something like that. It's not typically people who are just irresponsible and ran up a bunch of credit card debt that they don't want to pay back.
Mm-hmm. Doing it not that they're doing it as a scheme or something like
exactly.
that.
Exactly.
Like, I'm going to file bankruptcy. Oh my. Okay. I'm not thinking that, I'll file bankruptcy. Like you say, buy a lot of stuff knowing that I'm going to file bankruptcy.
Right.
And, and doing that. And then also, as far as criminal law, I know everything is confidential, but can you tell us about a case or something that was interesting that you had, that the office had maybe?
I have one right now that I think a lot of people don't realize is illegal. I have a client who's going through a divorce, and he and his wife are just kind of going back and forth, kind of just being petty to each other. And he posted her vehicle for sale on Craigslist for free. So I guess not for sale, posted it for free. And she got, I think, 8 phone calls within an hour, according to the police report. So
he posted her car?
Her car, yes.
On Craigslist?
Yes.
For free?
Correct.
Okay.
So he then got charged with unlawful posting of a message, which is a 2-year felony. So
I never heard of that.
And most people have it. Most people think they're just being funny, or they're playing a game with somebody or something like that.
Yeah.
And they end up getting charged with something that could send them to prison for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and if you're a habitual offender, the sentence is doubled. So for a habitual offender, that could be a 4-year prison sentence that they might be looking at. For something that they thought was just a silly, trick
funny.
they were playing on somebody.
Okay, you won't think it's funny next time.
No.
Okay, you're watching Time to Talk, and today is March 13th, 2019, and we're talking to Attorney Jen Roach from Open Legal Services, and we're taking your calls. So we have a caller on the line now, Jen.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
Yes, I can.
Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One is, how does one go about starting what I believe should be a class action lawsuit against a company who I believe is taking advantage of me and many others like me?
I don't do a lot of civil work, which is what that would be. It would be a civil lawsuit. I think the first thing you want to do is do some research into attorneys that do handle civil lawsuits, and find somebody who has some experience. Probably you want someone with experience doing class action lawsuits. There are extra steps that have to be taken in class action lawsuits that don't have to be taken in other civil cases. So it's important to have somebody who knows exactly what that process is and has experience handling those types of things. So I would start
Okay.
doing some research. You can probably just Google and start there.
Okay.
Okay, the other question is, when you've adopted children, and they are now of legal age, and you choose not to make them a part of your legal will, can they possibly sue my estate upon my death?
They possibly could, and that's another area, unfortunately, that I don't do a lot of work in. They're your heirs. There are ways to write people out of your will, and I just don't have enough experience in that area to give you good advice on how to do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank
For
you.
the show.
Thank
Thank
you.
And I just want to say to you, Argie, I just love your show and
Oh.
all of the guests that you have had on your show thus far.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. I appreciate it.
Well, this is Gloria Roberts, and I just want to say thank you again for having such wonderful shows.
Thank you. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Have a good evening.
You too, Gloria.
Bye-bye. So, it must give you a great sense of accomplishment and pleasure when you can help people.
It does.
Yeah.
It does very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the opposite when I can't help people, or when we go into court and we don't get the result we wanted. That's devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it can't always work out right.
No.
But the thing is, you give it your best.
Absolutely.
And maybe that person at least has more information or in a better place one way or another than they were, even if the outcome didn't come out exactly as they wanted it.
Right. Right. And they had somebody advocating for them who knew the process, who knows what the law is, and who try to line the facts up with the law to make it work in their favor, which is honestly more than a lot of people could probably do for themselves. So I think that's part of the thing that I guess I like about it, even when we're not successful, is that they had somebody who was doing the best they could for them and who knew how to do it.
Okay. It's good to be able to advocate for people.
Yes.
Yes, yes. So the office is on Kenmore, one of the offices.
Yep, my office is in Muskegon, but there's the open office in Kenmore in Grand Rapids.
Is there a lot of difference with practicing law in Muskegon County versus Kent County?
Yeah, sometimes there's a lot more people in Kent County, so sometimes the courthouse feels a little more hectic in Kent County than it does in Muskegon. Muskegon's more of a small town, so you get a little bit of the small town feel at the courthouse, and Kent County, I think you get a little more of a larger city feel. But other than that, it's really the same. Just going in and making the argument on behalf of the client, and trying to get the outcome that they want.
Do you have a family?
I have a husband. I got married last year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And then I have a brother and sister-in-law, 2 nephews that live in Muskegon also. And then I have family in Kalamazoo, my parents, my in-laws, and more nieces and nephews. So
Yeah.
yeah, lots of love.
Yeah, so you stay pretty busy.
I do. Yeah.
What are some of the community things that you're involved in?
I am one of the co-founders of a nonprofit called the Sisterhood Initiative.
What's it called again?
The Sisterhood Initiative. So what our goal is to help women in Muskegon County meet their needs, in one way or another, we're working on becoming a 501c3 corporation. At this point, we're just a nonprofit with the state. We take in donations from people and find them good homes for women who need them, who have recently moved for one reason or another. We had a woman recently who was escaping a domestic violence relationship and didn't take anything with her, and she had a baby, so she needed diapers and clothing and all that kinds of stuff, so we were able to help her with some of that. And what we have coming up on the 23rd of this month is a prom dress event where we will have local girls who can't afford a prom dress come in, and they'll be able to get a prom dress for free from the donations that we've received from people.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Where will that be?
That is going to be in downtown Muskegon at the Episcopal Church, which is by Hackley Park.
That's such a good idea, because many prom dresses are so expensive.
So expensive, exactly.
Goodness gracious. And it's one night, right?
Right. And then you need the jewelry and shoes, and we're going to have some of that stuff for girls to pick from too.
All those things that go with it, and you don't want to be left out.
Exactly. That's a big deal when you're in high school, going to prom and looking good.
Yes, that's a big deal. So it's good that you can do that, and make that special for people.
Yeah, we're really excited about it.
At least that's one less thing that people have to worry about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you say to young women, especially, who would like to get into the legal field?
Work hard. Work hard. Do well in school. Stay focused on school. Don't get sidetracked, with boys or extracurricular activities too much. When I went to law school, somebody said that when you go to law school, you'll do well if you like to read and you like to write. And thankfully, I like to do both of those things. And it is a lot of reading. It was every night you're sitting down, you're reading, case books and other things like that. And it's hard work. You have to really dedicate yourself to it. When people ask me about going to law school, I always tell them you have to want to work really hard to get through it. But if you want to do that, then absolutely go to law school, if that's something that you really want to do. But it has to be something you really want to do, because otherwise you're not going to want to work hard for it.
Okay. Going back on some of the things that we were talking about like criminal law.
Yes.
And you hear different phrases, sometimes like double jeopardy and things like that. What does that mean?
Double jeopardy means that you can't be tried for the same thing twice. So when I first learned about double jeopardy, I was in 7th grade and the OJ trial just happened. And my dad explained that to me, that he was tried, and I thought, well, what if they get more evidence, or what if this or that happens? He was found not guilty, so that's it. You can't go back and try him again. He's done. So that's essentially what double jeopardy is. Once the jury's impaneled, that's it. If you don't get the decision you want, then you don't get a second chance.
We also hear about people getting exonerated. Sometimes they were accused of a crime or even convicted, but they didn't do it. For real, they didn't, because everybody said I didn't do it.
Right.
But they really didn't do it.
Right.
So how often does that happen?
I couldn't tell you how often that happens. I think it's rare. Nowadays, I think that the criminal justice system has gotten a lot better than it used to be. We have a lot more safeguards in place. But that's what the appellate process is designed for. So if you get convicted of something and it's a crime you didn't commit, you would appeal the case. You have to show that there was some type of error that happened at the trial level to be able to appeal your case and hopefully get a new trial. That's ultimately what you're trying to do when you are appealing a case, or have the appeals court decide that your conviction should be thrown out altogether. Or if you find new evidence, the good example of that is DNA evidence, because DNA wasn't a thing, 30 years ago, but now it is. So, if you hear a lot about people who were incarcerated for, a rape or a murder where, DNA evidence was found, but nobody knew what to do with that until, DNA science came about. So you hear about a lot of people who are getting out or getting their convictions set aside because there was DNA evidence that proved it was somebody else that committed the crime.
Why does the legal process seem to move so slow? Well, it does move slow. Let's say that.
It does, and it's because there are so many people that are in the legal system. There are a lot of people, getting divorced, or a lot of people who've gotten charged with crimes or things like that. It all kind of piles up, and it takes more time. It's like being in line at the grocery store. If the more people that are there, the longer you're going to have to wait in line. So that's kind of what the issue is.
Okay. And hasn't the statute, we got another question from the
good.
back. Hasn't the statute of limitations run out 2 or 3 times on Bill Cosby's charges, even before he was taken to court?
I don't know enough specifics about that case. So I don't know, I think, that he was charged with crimes against victims where the statute of limitations had not run out. And I think some of the older victims, or alleged victims, statute of limitations had run out, so he couldn't be charged on their cases, but he could have been charged on things that happened more recently before the statute of limitations expired.
Okay. So looking at additional women who brought forth charges later than maybe some of those that brought charges from 20, 30, however
Right.
many years ago.
Right, exactly.
Okay, all right. And so if anybody has any other questions, our number is 616-459-4881. And speaking of questions, will you take people's questions just briefly on the phone sometimes?
Yes, I will. Absolutely. And I have a couple of past clients who will have something come up and they'll give me a call, and I'm always open to that.
Okay, that's very helpful,
Yeah.
because it's hard to sometimes get to an attorney, or you just have a question, just need to know, okay, what's the next thing I need to do?
Right, yeah. And if it's just a quick question, it's not going to take much time out of my day. It might take 5 minutes for me to answer a question like that. I don't want people to have to go in and pay an attorney to get a quick question like that answered. It just doesn't seem worth the time and effort. Might as well just take care of their question for them.
What's been the response of the community to Open Legal Services, your business?
Well, Open Legal Services came from another nonprofit that was very similar. And we've had a lot of success with it. A lot of people, there's a need there for affordable legal services for people, and people are taking advantage of it.
Do you plan any events in the near future?
We don't have any planned as of yet, but we do like to do events to educate people on some of the areas of the law or things they should be prepared for when they're facing a case.
What do you think are some of the key things that people need to know about the law?
Well, I guess it would depend on what area
area
the law
they're-
is.
they're
because,
looking at.
Yeah, it's going to depend on what area of the law it is. If you have something come up, my best advice is to get in touch with an attorney and find out what you need to do to get yourself prepared for what's happening, or what the next step is that you need to take.
And I would say also that the internet is so helpful. Not that you want to try your case on the internet, but at least you can research for yourself a lot of information so you can develop the proper questions, maybe.
Yes, that's true. The thing you want to be careful with when you're researching on the internet is you don't want to. There's a lot of people on the internet who think they're experts on stuff who don't know what they're talking about. So you don't want to read something. I always say people come in and they say, well, my uncle's cousin told me that I should X, Y, Z. Well, your uncle's cousin doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And that you're going to find a lot of that on the internet too. So you need to be careful that you're going to credible sources on the internet as opposed to things like that where somebody's just telling you, what you need to do and they don't know anything about the law. They think they know for one reason or another, but they're not trustworthy.
Yes. Your friend's uncle or whatever
Right.
hasn't even been to grade school, let alone law school.
Sometimes, yeah.
So, yeah. And then also you have to look at the area where you are.
Right.
Different counties have different laws, cities, states,
Yep.
all of that.
Yep, exactly. Some things might be a violation of a city law, and sometimes people get violated or they get a violation that they didn't even know existed. But the law doesn't care. If you broke the law, you broke it, no matter whether or not you knew you were breaking the law.
Right, right. Do you deal with traffic violations or anything like that?
I've done a couple of those. I don't do a lot of it, for like speeding tickets or things like that. I took one that I thought was questionable, that somebody got cited for causing an accident, and I thought there was enough there to take the case, and the officer ended up not showing up to the hearing. So, it was just dismissed.
Didn't show up?
Right, yeah.
Oh.
So when that happens, if you get a speeding ticket and you fight it and the officer doesn't show up for the court hearing, then your ticket's just dismissed. So it works out good for
that would
client.
work out. That doesn't happen every day.
No, no. I think the hard thing is, as far as hiring an attorney for like a speeding ticket or some other traffic violation, is sometimes those tickets won't cost you much. Maybe $100, $200, whereas hiring an attorney is going to cost you a few $100s. So sometimes it's better to just pay the ticket, or not better, but maybe easier for you to just pay the ticket or to represent yourself in court.
Mm-hmm. So that you don't have to put out all that money.
Right, right.
Right, exactly. So what are some of the things that you would like people to know about their legal rights?
That's another thing that would kind of depends on the area that they're talking about. Be informed. Do your research. Talk to an attorney who's going to be able to keep you informed about what's going on with your case. That's probably the most important thing. You want to know what's going on. You want to know what you're getting yourself into. You don't want to be, going through the process blind. That's very important.
And also, I would imagine it's important not to just, when you get an attorney, not to just call them every few minutes. With every, we know you're upset about whatever it is that you're going through.
Right.
But if you call them over and over and over, instead of, being very focused,
right,
that's not a good thing.
Right. And, a lot of times we're not in the office. We're in court a lot. So I think people call and leave a message, and then they get frustrated if they don't hear back within an hour. I might have been in court all morning, or, all day, even a lot of times. So, sometimes you're just going to have to wait a little bit longer. And I know that's frustrating for people. It's frustrating for us to, to come back from a long day at court and you've got a pile of messages from people who've been calling. But, we really do want to get back to you and resolve whatever your issue is. But, we're just busy.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about people filing lawsuits, like, somebody fell on your steps or something like that, and they say they're going to sue you. How do you defend yourself?
Well, that's another area that I don't do a lot in. I think the important thing is for people to have homeowners insurance or renter's insurance, because that might cover whatever damages do come out of a lawsuit. If your dog bites somebody, or if somebody slips and falls on your porch, your homeowner's insurance will probably cover that. So that's an important thing to make sure you have that, because sometimes that's something people don't get because they don't think they can afford the expense. But if something like that happens, you can't afford to not have insurance.
Right.
So that can be really important.
Because then they can hit you directly.
Exactly.
In your pocket.
Yeah.
Do you work with landlord-tenant issues?
I do. I primarily represent landlords. I have on a couple of occasions represented tenants.
And what do you do as far as the landlords? How do you help them?
I take care of the evictions for them, which is, not an easy job. It's not, it doesn't make me popular, but I have one landlord that I do a lot of evictions for, and he works with people. So he typically won't do anything until people have gotten like 2 months behind on their rent. And then you have to send, excuse me, you have to send them a notice telling them that you want them to either, pay your rent or get out by this date. And if they don't do that, then you can start court proceedings.
What do you do if the tenants left and you don't know where they went, but they left a lot of damages, but you can't find them? And how long do you have to try to do anything?
Well, depending on how extensive the damage is, you can keep their security deposit to help you cover some of those damages.
And what if it goes beyond that?
If it goes beyond that,
the damages.
you can try to sue them. There are alternative ways to serve people even if you don't know where they are. So you'll want to at least get the paperwork filed so that you can get a judgment entered, because once you have a judgment entered, if you ever find that person and they're working, you can garnish their wages to collect on your judgment. You can
How long do you have to do that?
to
In terms of months or something?
to do the lawsuit, or
Yeah.
I am actually not sure. You'd have to do it before the statute of limitations was up. So probably, I would try to do it within a year if it was me and if I was advising a client. There's no reason to wait. So, get on it.
What was your most rewarding case?
I had a client who, I don't remember how she became my client, but 5 years later, she had moved to Virginia or something with her husband, and he took their children to Michigan to visit family, and then he stayed. He tried to enroll the kids in school. He wouldn't go back, and she obviously wanted to get her kids back home. She wasn't expecting any of that to happen. So she had filed paperwork in Virginia to try to get the children to come home. Her husband filed paperwork in Michigan for divorce. So I was able to go to court and argue successfully to the judge that the children should be returned to her. So that was a really good feeling when the judge made his opinion that the kids had to go back to her. Because I don't have kids, so I can't imagine what that would be like to have your kids in a different state and you can't go there and you can't be with them and you don't know if they're going to come back. She was very emotional, so I was really happy that I was able to help her with that.
That must have felt really good.
It really did. It really did.
Really good, really good. What can be done in cases where one parent is saying, well, the kids are being abused by the other parent, and I don't care what the court says, I'm not sending them back there?
You could file, it's called an ex parte motion if something really is happening or you really believe something is happening. You've got to have the evidence for it. Sometimes that can be hard, but you can file an emergency motion to try and get their parenting time suspended until somebody can look into it more closely. You could involve CPS if it was that serious. You can call them and file a complaint. Those are probably the two quickest options because anything else is probably going to take a lot longer.
Okay, and you have to obey the law.
Yeah, you do. I mean, if you don't, you could be held in contempt of court, which could result in fines. It can result in jail time. I mean, you don't want that to happen either.
Right. Excuse me. So have we covered all of the different services that Open Legal Services of West Michigan has?
I think we
You
have.
think we did family
covered a
law,
lot, yeah.
bankruptcy. Let me see, what else?
Social Security.
Oh, Social Security.
Yeah. Criminal.
Criminal, yeah. Do you help people with employment issues at all? Or
No, we don't.
Don't get into that?
No.
Okay. But we covered the ones that you do.
We did. Yes.
Yes. And of course, is everything confidential?
Absolutely. Yep. As soon as you come in and meet with me, your information is confidential. Anything you tell me, I'm going to keep it to myself. The only other people who might find out about it is office staff. For assistant, or example, if my assistant's working on a file, she'll see your information, but she's going to be keeping that confidential also.
Okay. Anything else that you would like to share with our viewers?
That's a big question.
Well, can you share your information as far as your phone number, address, and website?
Sure. Yep. My personal website is www.jenniferroachlaw.com. My phone number is 231-722-4052. And my email address is Jenny, which is JENNIE, at jenniferroachlaw.com.
And of course, we'll put that up on our screen as well.
Great.
All right. Well, Jen, thank you so much for being with us on Time to Talk
Yeah,
today.
thanks for having me. It was really fun.
And we hope you'll come back from time to time.
I would love
Thank
to.
you.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for watching. You've been watching Time to Talk. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. All right. Bye-bye.